Hello and welcome to our complimentary webinar, which is brought to you today in partnership with Verint, Auscontact's national platinum sponsor, and it's entitled Leading a WFH Workforce from Home. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time, with the help of today's special guest, Ian Harrison, Director Customer Experience Optimization at Verint APAC, we hope to have you leaning into the conversation, reflecting on your approach, as well as providing some ideas to take back to your respective businesses. And to round off the hour, we'll be having a Q&A at the end. I'm Fiona Keogh, CEO of Auscontact and your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, let's use the time to quickly run through some housekeeping. Remember to interact with us to maximise the benefit, and as you know, there's no need to take too many notes because we'll be providing you with the recording of the webinar. To interact with us, please use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions or make comments for Ian or myself from time to time. Remember, we will be having a full Q&A session at the end. So please type your questions as we go along so you don't forget to ask them. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and experience any issues with your internet connection, please note that on the control panel you can click the raise hand button and the Auscontact team will rush to your aid, or you can revert to your confirmation email with the link to the webinar, and all the relevant phone numbers and access codes will be available there for you. I know that many of you are familiar with asking questions, but let's try out the questions pane on the control panel now, just in case. And the question for today is, which state border is closing today in Australia? So for those of you that need hints, it's the most popular air route between, and Elizabeth knows the answer, she's got one side of the equation. Nam's got it. An anonymous attendee has half of it. 2 anonymous attendees have got it. Okay, David's got it. Okay, Joe's got half of it. Michael's got the whole answer. Sandra's got the whole answer. Okay, so obviously we've got a very bright group of attendees today. The answer is Victoria and New South Wales, which is something that probably needs to happen, and sadly, let's hope it's for the shortest possible time so that we can get ourselves working together. So with that, I'm very pleased to welcome Ian Harrison, Director, Customer Experience Optimization at Verint. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Fiona. Appreciate the welcome and the introduction. So my name is Ian Harrison, and as it says there, I work for Verint. I have been working in contact centres and back office operations since 1994. And during that time, I have led teams in outsourcing, in financial services, both in the back office and in the contact centre, and also spent a little bit of time in transport and logistics as well. My experience has been largely in large-scale people leadership, and one of my passions has been how do you lead teams of people using great technology such that the teams of people can deliver fantastic customer service whilst at the same time being the recipients of great technology to allow them to focus more on humanised care and nurturing and great outcomes for customers rather than worrying about compliance and the regulatory obligations, which is becoming an increasing challenge. And more importantly, in the world of the COVID and pandemic nowadays, it's very hard for all of our frontline staff to constantly focus on caring and nurturing when they're so worried about regulatory compliance and their obligations in that space. So in today's webinar, I'm going to focus particularly on what it's like working in the new normal. So how do you lead a team of people who are working from home? Many of you obviously are probably working from home yourselves or working in new ways. And much of that leading is happening from the home. And that means leaders need new operational compliance and resilience platforms and technologies and new ways of working that enable them to provide caring customer service at the same time as delivering an operationally resilient and a compliant operation. As it turns out, I've got two teenagers, young, I suppose 20-year-olds at home, working from home at the moment, facing into a PC screen every day, frustrated and struggling with the leadership that they're receiving from their respective team leaders and managers. And it's interesting watching how challenging it is for them and how challenging it is for their managers to keep them connected to their environment and help them work productively and feel connected to their organisation. So look, I think it's worthwhile spending a bit of time looking at something that sets the scene first. So where are we in this change? So this change curve is actually part of a methodology that Verint use when we provide change management as part of our business advisory consulting service to our clients. So as we support them implementing new solutions, often these impact their operating models and their organisational design. So this is actually derived from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. Some of you may know she wrote a book on death and dying back in the late 60s, which has led to a whole approach to grief and loss. And it basically describes the emotions that someone goes through during bereavement: the grief, the shock, the denial, the anger and depression, and then eventually this sense of final acceptance of the situation. As many of us know, organisational psychologists have found that many of us go through similar things when we're facing change. Usually it's change in a technology platform or a reorganisation and restructure, not always a pandemic as the one we have been through and are still going through right now. So the challenge for us is that employees, as they first become aware of the situation, it's a subtle, slow awareness, and then they move into anger and panic, depression, sometimes slowly accepting reality, and then moving into testing and integration, and then a commitment phase where they sort of accept the status quo. So the challenge, therefore, is that leaders need to use technology and interventions to identify areas of resistance and obstacles and remove them and mitigate them, so they can get the employees and their team members over to the right-hand side where they're rebuilding their confidence, they're settling into a new way of being. At the same time, obviously, you need to do that in a really supportive way. So this session today is going to briefly give some guidance as to how to use technology and tools to enable you to have more insights into your people and therefore have more data and more time to focus on supporting the team members to provide great service. It's a pretty stressful environment. I won't go through all of these because we're all acutely aware of the stresses that we're experiencing ourselves at the moment. The stats on the left-hand side, they come from a very recent Ipsos survey or poll that was done globally. And what it shows me is that obviously anxiety and the challenges that the pandemic is bringing is overwhelming in many senses, but it's overwhelming not just for our employees, it's often overwhelming for us. So our challenge is that, you know, our employees are part of this cohort on the left who are being impacted by COVID, and we're expecting them at the same time as they're being impacted to support customers who are being impacted and to be led by leaders like many of us who are also being impacted in different ways and going through different challenges. So whilst we're equipped to deal with crisis management and, you know, face many business changes such as competitive products and technical failures, we haven't ever really had a chance to think about this all-encompassing challenge. So I'm going to touch briefly on the employee and then the leader, and then deep dive into some more detailed discussion. So what are employees worried about? So for the employees, the challenge in the current environment is communication. So how will I get information from my colleagues and my manager? How am I going to get that fed to me in a timely fashion? How do I stay connected to the work environment from home? Flexibility. So with all the changes that are occurring, how do they know that they're going to get the responsiveness they need? So if they suddenly have another change in the regular hours, or there's another lockdown, or there's a border shut, how are they going to be able to manage and influence their rosters and their schedules and interact with their managers to advise of when they're able to work? And do they even have the option to do that? How easy is it? Productivity and performance. So this is a really interesting focus area for us as leaders. So for the employees, how do they know they're delivering the right customer outcomes? How do they know that they're going okay? Or how are they compared to their peers? And are they saying the right things at the right time in the right ways? And behind the scenes, they're probably sort of wondering too, is when am I going to get trained on that product I didn't know anything about this morning, because they keep telling me I'm going to get it, but no training is coming my way. As a leader, quite often the biggest priority is visibility. So how do you know what your employees are doing? Are they doing it at the right time? Are they feeling okay? And are they still feeling connected whilst they're out there working from their bedrooms or their various locations at home? If volumes are fluctuating up and down, what are the new customers' calls about, and what are those inquiries and call drivers? Do you need more people in the right place? Can you divert volume to other channels such as digital? Risk and compliance. So again, are the employees saying the right thing at the right time and in the right ways? So what's critical as well is that, are your employees providing a new level of, an appropriate level of understanding and caring for these new customers who are now interacting with your contact centre, who previously have never dealt with an organisation? And how are you making sure that as those staff are doing those interactions and handling those queries, that they're feeling supported and engaged? So I'm going to focus today on 6 key leadership focus areas: resilience, communication, productivity, visibility, managing volume, and then we'll touch on compliance. So firstly, let's talk about resilience. So Gartner have a definition of operational resilience. And for many of us, we will remember having to do business continuity planning for a contact center issue, which might have been an outage for a day, and planning what would happen if you lost site A and where you would divert the calls. Or we might plan for a loss of an IT system that was critical, and how would we fall back to the old mainframe system. And for many of us, it was a one-off test, and we would do some severity rankings. Now we're in the world where we're having to demonstrate our competency to be able to ramp up or slow down our operations, as Gartner say here, very much in a sense through trial and error. But really critically, operational resilience is, as it says, that ability to be able to modify your operations and your processes very much on the fly and still be able to deliver an appropriate level of operational excellence. So there are various phases of recovering operational performance in a pandemic. Initially, it's the sort of mad scramble to get IT working, having a new workspace at home, sending everybody home, getting connectivity working, checking everybody has the kit and the equipment that they need. That's in the mobilization stage. Then we move on to enablement, where we're looking at system access and latency and checking that people can interact at the right speed because we've got the kit there, looking at new priorities, moving on then to stabilization, where we look at the visibility of interaction handling and whether there's the right quality of interactions, start rethinking capacity planning, try to get some insights on call drivers, and then start thinking about productivity and the various gaps and interactional data sets that we can draw conclusions between. And then finally, phase 4 is sort of work from home resilience, where we're focusing very much now on service. We might be looking at new ways of scheduling and rostering people and using new algorithms, looking at the utilization of the work from home workforce, understanding backlog and how that's driving the performance, and then starting to think about whether our measures of performance such as service level are allowing us to be empathic, providing empathic care to our customers. And then I think really importantly, and we'll touch on it a bit later, what's the measure of productivity? Are we focusing on adherence, or are we focusing on outcomes? Do we need to change our metrics and make them slightly different KPIs and create more visibility for the employees themselves? One of the big challenges, of course, is that much of this is changed by different work coming back onshore, BPOs who are no longer able to operate. So in many cases, we've got new services being provided with new processes and new operational challenges that have landed on our doorstep that were unexpected. So I want to talk a little bit about how do you lead resilience and the recovery of resilience when you're sitting at home and you're thinking about your employees. So if I look at the right-hand side here, what I'm seeing here is a top list of issues and concerns for managers of remote teams. So large percentage of the managers, as you can see here, are focusing on worrying about employee productivity reducing. Many of them are worrying about the reduced focus on their employees themselves. Team cohesiveness, are my team still working together? Are we working towards team goals? Maybe they're working too hard. Are they focusing on the right things? Some of them are thinking about their employees' career implications and what it means for them. And as you can see on the left, what we then have is this view of the execs. So if you're a senior exec running a contact center or you're running a call center, whilst you're thinking about all of these managing remote team issues, what we're also thinking about here is these 6 lenses that I'm going to talk to a bit more detail. So the first ones of these that I see as critical is that if you're going to run a resilient workforce from home, you really need to make sure that you can capture your data and the interactions of the voice and the screens of all your agents when they're working from home in the same way, hopefully you're able to do that when they were working in the contact center itself. You need to know also that you have adherence to the right regulatory and controls requirements. How do you know that the agents are doing the right thing in the right way? Real-time monitoring of conversations and script adherence. Do you know your agents are saying the right thing with the right within the right guidelines and the right advice model? We need visibility of work from home productivity and activity tracking. Critically, we need to understand complaints and disputes recording and tracking, and to know that those are being followed and reported back as per the regulatory guidelines from a regulator such as ASIC. And knowledge management. Need to ensure that you have knowledge management driven processes and flows with context sensitive guidance. So I want to spend a little bit of time just deep diving into each one of those. So what you're seeing here is a maturity assessment that Verint uses with its clients. And I'm going to skim through these at the moment. There's a lot of detail that goes behind this. Is usually a sort of an output that we use to present back to our key customers. So down the left are the key areas that I call the sort of assessment optics that you must get right that I just ran through in the previous slide. So these are critical aspects, and you can see there's an opportunity here, and if we had the time we would go through with each of you and your organizations to rate where you see your maturity. So if I work through an example here, so voice and screen capture, this is saying the maturity at the moment is sort of hovering between low and high, and evidence of best practice is that calls are recorded and captured as our screens concurrently across all locations, and they're stored for historical view, call quality compliance purposes, and they can be used manually to score against the compliance criteria. So that's a critical aspect of something that each one of you should be able to have a level of high confidence in the maturity of ranking. Move on to conversation and script adherence, and you could see we could do a similar thing here. If we had the time, we would sit down with each of you and do that within your organizations. So you need to be able to ensure that all your agent conversations are using the correct accredited advice model and with the appropriate call scripts or conversational frameworks, and that the right products are being sold and offered. And very importantly, you need to be able to identify if anything untoward, unconscionable conduct is occurring. So again, we would suggest that you rate yourselves from low to high, and consider as you do this for each one of these optics down the left-hand side, how are you going to move the continuum towards the high end? So what tools, techniques, processes, structures can you bring to bear that will shift you towards the right? So with the automation of controls and the regulatory requirements, critically, all interactions need to be analysed and scored against the desired regulatory compliance and quality criteria. And realistically, in this world, you need to be able to do that 100% of the time. what I'm finding as I talk to contact center operators around the country is many of them had a quality management team. A lot of the quality management team have been thrown onto the telephone to take phone calls, and it's very challenging to even quality control and check up to 1 to 2% of the phone calls, let alone all calls 100% of the time. So where are you on that continuum? Visibility of productivity and activity. So can you easily see across your contact center the employee status across all your different sites and locations and home bedrooms and kitchens and cupboards where your employees are working? Can you see areas where you can intervene, areas where you can help, and are you able to use any sort of trigger for real-time interventions to be able to respond quickly and assist your work from home agents? Employee management across different locations. So again, rostering and scheduling people across multiple sites, more sites than many of they've ever had in the past, and to be able to tie that performance of the agents into a workforce management solution fed by the quality tools and your quality management platform, such that coaching and performance opportunities can be pushed to the workforce management tool. And in many cases, that also needs to be pushed to a mobile phone so that the agents can see that information in a really timely fashion. Provision of consistent and timely support for the agents really falls into this space here where we need to give them information available on their desktop as they're interacting with the customers. And that can be in the form of context relevant information, that's knowledge articles or scripts and workflows that allows them to make decisions on the fly and support the customers in an appropriate way. And then finally, the most critical thing is that all of this information, all these insights start informing your self-service engines. So if you've got a conversational AI strategy or an intelligent self-service platform, all the data that you're capturing needs to be used to identify and build and create an opportunity to start diverting volume away from the voice channel into the self-service channel. So this framework is something that we run through usually in detail, and time doesn't really allow me to go through it any more lower level than this, but if we need to, it's something that if anyone's interested, we can spend the time and have a conversation and talk through further in a one-on-one discussion. So I want to talk a little bit about communication. And for me, the first opportunity and the most powerful opportunity for communication is something called communities. So communities are the aggregation of information such that it can be shared and interacted with between multiple parties. So this can be for groups such as closed, private and semi-private groups that are sort of collaborative house communication platforms. It can be usually rolled out incredibly fast, and it means that forums are able to be created where FAQs and wikis can be shared, and you can have crowd collaboration, and you can have your work from home agents then able to share best practice ideas, handy hints, challenges, problems that they need solving, and to be able to gather timely information and share it with their colleagues. So the employees feel less isolated and allows them to engage with each other. So critical information from leadership can be published on a real-time community platform, and it can then remain current and accessible, and if it's moderated effectively, can be kept timely and up to date. So a community is a huge opportunity for an organisation like Auscontact as well. So you will see on the left here, there's a Auscontact community is available via the Auscontact website, where, as you can see now, there are articles and forums running on COVID and other relevant opportunities for information sharing. The one on the right here, APAN. So APAN is a US Department of Defense community page that is actually run by the Verint Communities platform. And as you can see there, they've quickly built a community and shared that with all of the Department of Defense and US government agencies to share and keep up to date relevant information about the pandemic. Most importantly though is golf. So in the middle here, Titleist, which is a big golf manufacturer. They use a community platform to run what they call Team Titleist, where they're able to share with their customers best practice, tools, clubs, handicaps, etc. So again, a collaboration tool to share ideas and thoughts. So I'm going to jump now into productivity. In the current world, we really need to, in a sense, redefine what is good. So what you find when you suddenly send your employees home is you're dealing with home internet connections, all sorts of other challenges where people have challenges with connecting. And in many cases, the previous measures of operational performance are probably largely unfair to hold your employees accountable to. So the goal is to keep your employees engaged so they can be as productive as possible. And as the leader, you're really the linchpin for all of the employees. And trying to make performance visible and fair is really the challenge to keep the team unified. So even though you're in the storm as well, you're the one they're looking to. So, really the challenge now is to adapt your utilization of the productivity tools you have and redefine a lot of your productivity measures and adjust the expectation of goals and targets. So it might take longer to do work because the back office is running slow, or the back office isn't there anymore in India and it's had to be done onshore and someone's learning how to do the work. You probably will discover that you have some gaps in your metrics, but that doesn't mean that you still can't measure or that you shouldn't take the opportunity to coach your employees. It's also really critical that you create performance that's visible to your employees in new ways. So how do you connect with the work from home team? So I've put up a couple of examples here, one of which is you can run surveys for your employees on technology platforms such as ones that Verint provides, which allows you to get timely access. Another example is performance. So what you're seeing on the left-hand side phone image there is the Verint Performance Management Platform that's pushing content to the employee's phone and allowing them to see their operational stats and articles around knowledge, etc. And on the right there, you're seeing other content being pushed to the employee's phone. I don't think that's a real employee because they're having time off and overtime all on the same day, but you get the sense of how that content can be pushed with using newer technology so that the agents can see that they're how they're currently performing, but also keep in touch with their leader. So I want to touch a little bit on something I mentioned earlier, which was how do you understand quality in the COVID-driven world? So one of the big challenges for many of us is in the normal world, it's hard enough to have 2% of all your calls being monitored, and in many cases that requires a large number of FTE who, as I said, many of whom are now seconded onto the phone calls or onto other work to keep on top of new volumes coming through given the current environment. So technologies that allow the automated scoring of calls are critical. So if you can do automated scoring of calls, then you can automatically populate the quality management forms, you can develop scorecards, you can feed coaching into your workforce tool and automatically schedule that coaching for your employees so that you can complete that loop and ensure that they're constantly improving in their quality and constantly being given appropriate training and coaching. So what 100% quality does, using tools like the Verint Automated Quality Management tool, is it allows you to gain visibility and drive adherence without having to have a team of people. It allows you to automate all of your call quality forms, load them into the tool, and allow the tool to monitor the calls, and you can redeploy your quality team, if they're not already redeployed on the phone, into focusing on the actual quality of the conversation rather than the compliance of the conversation. So as an example, Verint has many large organizations that it provides AQM for. We have a telco that was a particularly interesting example of automated quality management, where when they turned on the AQM tool, the tool completed more evaluations in its first day than the quality team in this particular telco had previously completed in a whole year. So it just shows you the power of the tool and the capability to then free up what would in that case been a huge number of employees doing call quality monitoring over about 4 million calls a year, freed them up to do far more productive activities. I thought I'd touch briefly on knowledge management because we alluded to that before. So knowledge management as a means to interact both with agents and customers is an incredibly powerful tool. Verint has a knowledge solution that it provides for many, many organisations around the world, and what it enables you to do is provide agents with information real time or historically, depending on what's driving your knowledge tool. It allows you to drive a multi-skilled agent workforce fast, reduces your training times down dramatically, and it allows you to increase your time to proficiency. So if you're standing up new agents or having to introduce new processes and procedures quickly, it's often very, very hard to get those agents off the phone, away from other distractions. So if you have knowledge and it's populated quickly and it's published in a timely fashion, then you can use that knowledge to reduce the training time and really increase the engagement with the employees. Cloud-based knowledge is really a key, as it provides a way for the home agents to access relevant information. So really great example here is KPMG. Sorry, I'm Capgemini. I should get the consultant firm right. Capgemini were able to demonstrate that they could reduce their volumes of queries via the phone by 60%. They reduced their handling time down by 75%, and they reduced their training time down by 50% as well. And as you can see there, the CTO from Capgemini's comment about KM Professional, which is a Verint product, was obviously a very positive one, and they were basically able to see that they were providing information to their employees in a very fast and timely fashion. So let's touch on visibility. So the challenge for all of us when we are working from home, leading teams of people or also working from home, is how do you keep visibility of what's happening across your workforce? So in this situation, there are a large number of challenges. The most difficult is that obviously as agents are working from home, we can't see them, we can't walk the floor. So my view is that the tools such as the Verint desktop process analytics is a key component to this. So what desktop analytics does is it runs on the employee's desktop and allows us to see where the employees are spending their time. So if you need to understand what your employees are doing, you need to understand what status they're in, then what we were able to do is provide a tool such as desktop analytics, which gives you transparency. So it allows you to know whether your agents are actually working in a productive system, if they're actually logging into the loan system or the transaction banking system or the fulfillment system, then that's productive system usage. Wouldn't it be nice to know whether your employees are doing that all of the time when you expect them to be doing that? So when they say they're in after-call work at home, are they actually sitting in front of their computer actually processing post-call activity, or are they actually spending their time surfing the internet, looking at Facebook or figuring out how many more COVID cases there were in their local postcode and not actually delivering productive work? And how much time is acceptable? So how do you get a feel for what's going on your contact center floor? So to me, desktop analytics becomes your virtual eyes and ears. So it enables you to walk the floor in your contact center without actually getting out there. So what you're seeing here is a couple of screenshots I took of desktop analytics, which shows you some of the examples around where time is being expended in particular applications. So many of you, you'll be using desktop analytics already in your contact centers for PCI compliance or quality, but not everybody uses the full power of it across their organization. So you can use desktop analytics as a fast way to ascertain who needs help or who needs to have a question answered. It can be used across all parts of your organization as well, so contact center and back office. So, you know, I think the powerful thing here is that it allows you to easily capture the agent activity and allows you as a manager to get a general sense of that people are logging in to do work and that where's their work going and where are they focusing most of their time. And as you can see, there's opportunities to then compare employees against each other, not for the purposes, in this case, of taking action or dealing with them in some sort of punitive way, but to understand where they need additional support and help. So if you have a particular agent who's spending more time in one system than another and it seems out of the ordinary, we would need to understand that. So, you know, in this case here, we've got an example that, you know, Anthony Smith up here seems to be spending an awful lot of time in idle, and we'd like to understand why that is. So can we reach out and provide him a level of help that might allow him to be as productive and as supportive as the other employees in his team? I'll touch quickly on workforce management. I've alluded to it previously. It's a key component of your work from home capability. If you haven't got a workforce management solution that's allowing you to schedule on roster, distribute employees across multiple sites, such as home work sites, then you need a tool which allows you to create that transparency, and you need that to feed into Performance Manager. So Performance Manager is what we call the sort of cockpit for the contact center home agents. So it allows the home agent to see what's happening. It allows you as a leader to see that same data and pull all of the data sources together in a single view. So you can build scorecards and dashboards here that allows you to keep your work from home agents informed on their performance, and really critically allows them to see how they're going against their peers and provide a centralized dashboard for you as a leader to understand the overall performance of your team, pretty much as if they were in the same contact center on the floor and you were sitting at your desk as a team manager or contact center leader. I want to talk a bit about voice of the customer and the analytics that we can do in that space. So I was fortunate enough to be running one of the largest financial services contact centres during the Royal Commission, the Banking Code of Practice. And you might say fortunate how, in that it was obviously a very challenging time, but one of the most powerful things I had was a suite of tools that were voice of the customer analytics tools. So those tools allowed me to deep dive into the call drivers of the call volume into those contact centres, about 50,000 calls a day, and understand what those calls were about. So when we were having hearings at the Royal Commission, we were able to see what those calls were, what the hearings were driving in terms of call volume, what the topics were about, and really importantly, were there any particular interventions that we needed to make in terms of our IVR, our products, or any information, insights we needed to share with the with the marketing teams and the customer relations team to help them position the bank's response back in the press and from a public relations perspective. Post that, in the Banking Code of Practice, we needed to show that we could respond and understand who our customers were that were vulnerable. So did we have customers who are suffering from domestic violence? Did we have customers who are elder abuse customers? So did we understand those customers and were we able to deal with them appropriately? And we were able to use speech analytics to help us understand those call drivers. So what you're seeing here in front of you is obviously an example from pandemic, and this is an example that we were asked to pull together for a government department actually in Australia. And what you're seeing here is the high-level summary, sort of somewhat anonymized version of speech analytics and how it was able to identify call drivers for different COVID conversational drivers. And what we're able to provide back was information such that we could see that it was call drivers to the business really around financial hardship. There were lots of calls of people who were already struggling due to the bushfires, and we noticed there was a correlation between those particular call drivers. We had a lot of calls, obviously, from people who are in the travel industry. They were able to identify sort of really interesting call scenarios where particular customer segments who had particular jobs were struggling more than others. And those insights then allowed the government department to update their knowledge base, and the knowledge was then used to obviously provide more relevant content back to the agents. So speech analytics is an incredibly powerful tool. If you have got call recording, you can run speech analytics over the top of your call recording, and that allows you to then analyse call trends and conversational drivers rather than when something happens, getting out and asking people out in the contact centre floor or the work from home environment to provide tick sheets or send emails through about their top call drivers. You've got something like speech that's analysing that for you. Given I mentioned bushfires, I thought I'd go back to the beginning of the year. It seems a bit of a past memory right now, but many of you will remember back in January, bushfires were a big driver of call volume into many contact centres, particularly insurance and financial services. And again, this is an example of a dashboard built from speech analytics data for one of our customers in Australia, which shows you the power of the tool, being able to understand the volume of calls, not just the fact that there was a number of calls, but what were they about, to what degree did the bushfires contribute to that call volume, and then breaking that down into category types, and then being able to understand and share insights back with the wider organisation about, what were the calls telling us, what were the things we needed to understand, how could we respond differently, and really importantly, how could we remove friction between the organisation and the customer, where call drivers were bushfire in this case, or previously COVID as well. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about compliance and risk. And again, we're going to have a very quick skim of a methodology that Verint uses to support its customers when looking at compliance. And this is a little bit similar to the earlier maturity assessment. So on the left, you can see the optics for a compliant contact center operation. So if you're running a customer experience function, the key things you must ensure you're delivering effectively are listed down the left-hand side here. If this was, if I could interact with this in the way I normally would, I would be moving these sliders along here, and what I'd be wanting you to assess for yourselves with support from my team would be, where are you from a capability perspective when it comes to, if I go down to one of the middle ones here, when it comes to real-time breach and vulnerability alerts, how capable are you to deliver proactive interventions in the moment to support customers? So are you able to respond quickly where a customer is in the world of banking? If the customer is a domestic violence customer and they're interacting with you and you've done something to identify that that customer needs particular help, how able are you to respond in the way you would like? And then, the other end of the continuum there you can see is the opportunity to rate yourself in terms of where is the degree of importance? Is it really high? If so, how do you close the gap between your capability and the importance that you place upon that particular optic? And I would be thinking in the world of work from home that many of these compliance optics are increasingly challenging. I earlier went through a few similar ones around the top 6 that need to be in place to have operational resilience in a work from home leadership perspective. But there's a broader list, obviously, that needs to be considered as you move into that work from home resilience space. Now, Verint run this methodology with large organisations, usually after spending a week or two within the organisation, and come back with a detailed report of which this is sort of the high-level summary, to give a recommendation on an approach to closing the gap between capability and importance and the degree of importance. So this in front of you here is the Verint suite of products and capabilities. The ones with the sort of, I guess you'd call it a biscuity colour highlight, ones that I've touched on in this very quick review today in thinking about work from home and leadership. There's a broader suite of products and capabilities there. If you want to find out more about any of these, then certainly we can have conversations with you subsequently. So what I will do now is move on to the Q&A session and hand back to Fiona to facilitate.
Thanks, Ian. Wow, didn't you just leave us with a whole multi-dimensional consideration? So we have some questions, which is terrific. First question, bit of an odd one to ask a software company, but I'll ask it anyway. How does Verint see the use of AI and self-service in the new normal? Will we see less tech and more human?
Wow. Look, I think it's a really interesting question. Increasingly, what I think we will see over time is more time for humans to provide the care for the more complex, long-running questions. I don't think any AI technology platform can ever take over managing a complex case. And what we see in the world of call centres increasingly, and many of you will have seen this, is that many of the simple, quick things are increasingly able to be fed through and managed in a self-service AI platform. And the insights from things like speech analytics and other things can increasingly optimize the AI self-service platform, but nothing can really take the place of a human being. So what I've seen in my experience is the short, simple things definitely are decreasing, and less of those sometimes annoying things make their way to the agents. But the things that do are the more complex issues where it's more than just a one-off interaction, it's case management. So what I would hope to think is that over time, AI and self-service can provide more resolution directly first time for the customer. And then hopefully AI can drive information and content to the agent so that when they have those more complex, long-running conversations with people and real interactions as humans, that they're provided sort of like what I call a digital twin, a digital assistant who can help them provide better human customer service rather than take over for them.
Thank you. You know that most contact centre managers are responsible for what we will call, for the purpose of this question, back office. And the question is, my call centre is under control, well, sort of, but their BPO has died offshore. I hope they don't mean that literally. And the backlogs from their back office are driving the volume to the contact centre. What would Verint suggest would be an approach or a solution for that?
Wow. Okay.
In 30 seconds or less.
In a very quick answer. So one of the biggest challenges I think for many of us, and if you're a bit like me, I was frustrated when I ran contact centres and then ended up running back office, that the back office didn't actually have a lot of transparency and visibility of its actual performance. So one of the most critical things for me is to understand the degree to which the back office performance obviously impacts the call volume, and work with the back office teams to create transparency. Now, there are tools and technologies that allow you to create that sort of visibility and transparency of the back office productivity, both of the employees, the agents, and also of their ability to hit the SLAs that they've signed up to deliver. So I think it's about creating the connection between the back office KPIs and measures and making them visible to the contact centre in the first instance, so that they at least have that information at their fingertips, whether they're working from home or in the call centre, and that information is available to the agents so at least they can answer the queries. But really importantly, how do you create efficiency and drive process improvement within the back office? To me, it's about making the performance visible. And there are, as I said, there are tools that actually Verint has a large suite of capability in that space, but that was more than 30 seconds, so I better stop.
That's fine. So here's the how long is a piece of string question, which I love that people ask, Ian. How long does it take to implement the solutions that you've been talking about today?
Well, that's a great question. In the old days, let's say a few years ago, before software as a service and cloud, it would have taken a while to stand up back-end infrastructure and technology that was required and the various architecture and so on. Nowadays, all of the Verint suite are all available in the cloud, and you can pretty much run all of these capabilities as a cloud-based service. So you can, in a sense, buy a bundle of capability and build towards that suite of holistic services. So I keep getting in trouble with my technology colleagues here in Verint, but I would say, standing up a solution, depending on what you already have, could take anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, as opposed to in the past you might have had a 6-month build or even longer to actually build back-end infrastructure and buy servers and so forth. So it really depends upon the type of solution, and I get lost in the types of clouds, whether they're on-prem or private clouds or hosted clouds, etc. But pretty much in a cloud environment, most things are capable to be implemented very rapidly.
Thank you. We have a question from Wei, and would like to know, is there, and this is about licensing, so I might be putting you on the spot, is there a limited license for each product for an organisation, or is it based on users or the number of products that you decide to switch on?
It's probably either or and all of the above. So again, depending on and again, I'm not a technical person to talk to this 100% accurately, but depending on whether you're going for a cloud-based solution, well, then that's licensed a slightly different way as opposed to an on-prem, more traditional solution, which is often licensed by things like named users or number of concurrent users or whatever. But yeah, Verint has lots of different pricing models depending on what the customer is actually after, and depending on the area of the focus as well. So, things like intelligent self-service with speech analytics together might end up with a slightly different pricing model than, say, speech analytics alone.
Okay, desktop analytics, where the reporting was incredibly rich. One might call it Big Brother or Big Sister if you were me. Do you want to just take us a little bit through where it's been implemented and any of the hurdles or challenges around the change management of implementation when you've gone from a relatively unseen activity in your workforce? You typically would know whatever statuses they're in, but not necessarily what systems they're navigating through.
Yeah, desktop analytics is probably one of the most powerful tools, but it can be used for good and evil. So my view, having rolled out desktop analytics across 3,500 people as on the customer side, is, as you say, it's an incredibly powerful tool and gives you a level of transparency and granularity of what's happening that perhaps most teams have never had previously. It is really critical that everything that is that we implement really is rolled out with a change management program over the top. And for me, desktop analytics is about creating the visibility so that you can ensure that every agent, particularly when they're working from home, gets the right level of support and we understand the variations. So you saw in one of those slides, and that was just a few, that there were variations in individuals' time being consumed in different areas. So is that because the agent's struggling? Is that because they need more help in a particular area? Is there a technology issue that they can't use a particular system? Or do we actually need to go and have a conversation with them about something? The other aspect to this as well is that we also will sometimes discover that there are, unfortunately, people who are working an awful lot harder than others, and that they might be very using a lot of time in a particular system, but actually may not be as productive as you might expect, or their quality might be poor. And as I've discovered, sometimes the quieter people who you think are the underperformers you never hear peep from actually turn out to be the ones that are superstars and you need to go and learn from. But I think really importantly in this environment, it's more about using DPA to understand how you can help rather than using DPA to understand where you need to do something in some sort of a punitive fashion. It's creating that transparency and giving another set of insights around the employee.
Thank you. The next questioner likes the idea of driving knowledge management real time to their team members' screens. In summary, it would save their team heaps of average handle time and free up capacity. And they want to know what they need to do to make it happen, apart from the obvious, Ian.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we talked about speech analytics, and we've talked about desktop analytics as well. So both of those things can provide context and timing to knowledge management. So speech analytics that I was talking to and quickly whizzed through is running historically. In other words, on yesterday's call volume and giving insights today. It is possible to turn speech analytics on real time. And that would mean, Fiona, if you and I were talking and I was the agent, it would hear that Fiona was asking about a particular product, and real-time speech would automatically populate the knowledge management tool with relevant articles about the product or service that you're asking me a question about. So as an agent, I wouldn't need to put you on hold and go and look through some document management system somewhere, or pull up some old material I'd learnt from training, or ask my colleague next door. It would be populated real time. So driving real-time knowledge would be something you would do through speech analytics. In the same way, desktop analytics could also capture fields being entered into a computer system and identify that that was an area where the agent might have needed an up-to-date knowledge article populated to the desktop. So I would think probably speech and desktop analytics would be the best things to drive real-time knowledge. And as the question says, it does drive a big reduction in the hold time, of course, and a great customer experience, because you're not putting the customers in sort of dead air for a while you go and find information. And also, if you think about it, you don't need to spend nearly as much time training your agents on where to find this information, because it's pushed to them real time.
Fantastic. There's a couple of questions that have come in, which I think you might answer offline.
Okay.
People wanting to book time with you, Ian, so that's rather good, and it's not for a date.
I have to do it socially isolated though.
Yeah, so there's one other question that's just come in, which is how do we fare to those being monitors? Questions are rife in the media about the ethics and legality of employee monitoring.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting question. I mean, interestingly enough, if you stop and think about it, every day when we all log on to our work computer systems, we agree by accepting and logging on, and we sort of forget, we sort of tick the box, that we are going to be monitored, and that behind the scenes, everything we do is being captured and monitored. For me, it's not about Big Brother and monitoring. It's about how, if you've got remote agents and they're struggling, how do you create that visibility? You can't get out there, you can't go and walk the floor, you can't chat to them as easily as you might have done in the past. You don't get that sort of sense and feel. So it's about capturing as much insight as you can so that you can provide insights to support and nurture and care. And I go back to my comments that in the session just a little earlier around measuring the right things. To me, we're focusing on giving them the best capability to achieve outcomes, rather than making sure that they adhere to everything they're supposed to be doing when it comes to their own performance. I want to make sure they're adhering to regulatory and compliance stuff, but I'm not so concerned about them adhering to schedules and rosters and so on as I am about making sure that in the day they are satisfied with the outcomes that they deliver, they feel engaged, the customers feel happy, and I feel I've got visibility to know that I've given them the support I need to give them.
Thank you. Well, with that, believe it or not, we're at the hour. I want to say a huge thank you to you, Ian, for sharing as you have in such detail and such depth, and also to Verint as our national platinum sponsor. With that, Ian, any closing remarks?
No, just to say thank you very much, and to say that, you know, I wish everybody who's a contact centre leader safety and the best operational environment you can possibly deliver to your work from home agents. And I hope that that's given you some great insights and ideas, and look forward to hearing more about the great things you've all done.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone, for your time today. Look forward to you the next time. And thanks to Ian and the team at Verint once again. Bye for now.